Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of Family Conversations, the show where the production values aren't always the best, but where the guests are always exquisite. My name is Jimmie Manning. I am professor and chair in the Department of Communication Studies here in beautiful Reno, Nevada. And today I have two guests who are coming together on a pretty interesting project. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment, but let me introduce them to you. First, we have Dr. Kathy Denker, who's an associate professor in communication at Ball State University, where she is both the director of graduate studies and the co-director of the basic course. Dr. Denker's research and teaching stem from the areas of interpersonal, family, and instructional communication, but across all three, she looks at a lot of issues of power. We also have Dr. Jordan Allen, who's at Utah Valley University as an assistant professor, and her teaching and research focuses on family and interpersonal communication with an emphasis on historically marginalized family relationships. And we're going to hear more about both of their programs of studies as we move forward. But first, what I like to do with every episode of Family Conversations is start off by asking the same first question, and that is, how did you find family communication studies? What was it that led you here, that made you stumble across it, or that inspired you? How did you come to family communication studies? Awkward pause.
I would love to go first.
Okay, Jordan.
I kind of had a very circuitous route to family comm, and so as an undergrad I studied like neuropsychology, was really into like the biological sciences, and then my senior year I was applying to like neuropsych grad programs, which was like a very different life. I don't know what that would have life looked like, but then as a senior I took a family communication class from Christina Yoshimura, and then at the University of Montana, and then it was just kind of sealed. I was really looking for, and like, I still am like looking for answers that kind of reconcile kind of the social construction and then also what I knew and learned in the biological sciences. And so that's how I got here. So kind of random, really lucky.
Kathy?
I actually wasn't introduced to the idea of family communication as an area really until my doctoral program. I went to a really great undergraduate and master's program at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, go Mavericks. But our interpersonal faculty were brilliant, but really heavy quant people. So there really wasn't much of a discussion of family, which brings in, more of the systems perspective and looking at the relationships and those norms that come into it, which I think are so important. But, we didn't have it. And that wasn't really something that we talked about until I entered my doc program. So I always thought that I was going to just be an interpersonal scholar, and they're so closely related, right? But that's where I came from.
Cool. And then one of the things I love about both of your research programs is that both of you study some pretty unique things or come at family communication in some pretty unique ways. And so one of the things I want to do with Family Conversations is kind of focus on people whose work may not look like other people's work. I think both of you in some ways fit into that. And so you want to talk a little bit about that? Maybe we can start with you this time, Kathy?
Sure. So my research in family comm and interpersonal comes really from issues of power, as you've already said. So thank you. I've always been interested in watching my friends' relationships and seeing where the problems are. Sorry, friends. But one of the really just fascinating things for me when I was in my early 20s was watching my friends partner off and go from these very equitable, wonderful relationships and then transition into these marriages where all of these issues started happening, which really is what led me to study issues of work-life balance and work-life negotiations in the interpersonal context. I love looking at, and I really respect the work that's done in org comm, and it's fascinating. But I'm really interested in the way that we, in our interpersonal relationships in our family, reproduce discourses that are out in society, like ideal worker norms and norms of motherhood and femininity that really bind us and limit us as individuals and families.
Well, and I think it's interesting. A lot of times when people look at the work you do or look at people who do work-life balance, they want to put that under the organizational communication umbrella. And yeah, it does belong there in part, but they're kind of afraid of the family or the relational side of that, right? So have you experienced that?
I mean, my dissertation advisor was an org com person because it was the best fit for me. And doing the qualitative methods, I approach it through dyadic interviewing because I really do want to hear the interactions there and see what's going on there. But I think that there's something definitely to be gained by focusing just on the family. And we're never going to remove the power structures that organizations have on family life, which is important and something we need to qualify. But in those very intimate communication moments with partners, we sometimes cause more of our problems than anything else.
Yeah, for sure. And I think part of the resistance to having that come into family and interpersonal also comes from people maybe being afraid to look at how much organizations have an impact on our lives and how it's located there,
Yes.
even if it's not, right? So yeah. So Jordan, you want to tell us a little bit about some of your work?
Yeah, I think similar to Kathy, I've been drawn to like issues of power, but I don't know if when I started, I wouldn't have had the vocabulary to like talk about it that way. And so I think like my first introduction into what we call like critical and interpersonal family communication was a family comm course I took in my doctoral program. And somebody was talking, we were doing some reading, and somebody was talking about like estrangement. And they were like, estrangement is this awful thing, or estrangement only happens because of bad things. And I was like, well, holy hell, I consider myself estranged, and I definitely don't see it in this way that it's like really being portrayed. And so I think that a large part of my research focuses on finding the fissures between how maybe culturally or dominantly culturally we might understand a word or a family structure. And then of course in the lived experience, how people deviate from that. And then also thinking about how having this image of what a family looks like, what a parent-child relationship, what twins look like, for example, how that really can impact actually the lived relationships and the lived experiences of those individuals. So,
now you also study objects, right? And so when people
yes.
hear that, they get kind of confused or don't quite understand, even though it makes perfectly good sense once you hear the explanation. So will you give us the explanation?
Yeah, and so my interest in objects really came from my dissertation where I was looking at estranged family relationships, and really estranged relationships were kind of looked at like non-relationships. Either there's no communication or it's a communication process of removing yourself, right, or distancing yourself. But the way that participants were talking about it, it's like very much there was a relationship, but that relationship was now constituted by objects or by what they would like say, I had one participant say like, I don't talk to my dad anymore, but his name's still on my birth certificate. And no matter how much I don't talk to my father, his name will always be there. Or I have my dad's ears, or I have my sister's or my brother's ears. That's never not going to be the case. And so really kind of this move into objects, new materialism or monistic ontology has been wrestling for a few years now, trying to explain how we're not only constituted in human communication, our relationships, but also really importantly with these non-human as well. And I think the important part of that is that it would be deceptive to say that we can just distance ourselves by decreasing our communication when we have all of these other things that are also constituting our relationships. And of course, power plays into how those things stabilize what we think a normal or a healthy relationship looks like.
Yeah, I see some real potential here to connect family communication studies to areas such as rhetoric. Like,
yeah,
because there's like that rhetorical work that looks at like how the layout of a home is rhetorical, and it kind of creates a heterosexual way of interacting or functioning as a family, and so on and so forth. So I love this idea that we're looking at objects or the material and trying to understand how that kind of plays into relationships. And then along those lines, both of you are part of the burgeoning critical interpersonal and family communication studies. I guess you could call it a movement. So, you know, what's going on there? Like, it looks like there's finally traction for critical scholars who want to study families.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so excited. I left, my doc program in 2009, and trying to define what I wanted to do in interpersonal and then family is I said I was a power scholar, and I still am. I had the opportunity to take my first class in my doc program was a seminar on power. And so that was very formative and also gave me words to describe what I wanted to look at. But I think the reframing of it as just a critical look, which is really what it is, opens it up so much more. And I'm so excited to finally have a term to group so many of these ideas under, and to give our students, teaching intro interpersonal this past fall. We've got the other things that the classics that we're supposed to teach, but to have the other areas that are so much more interesting to many of our students and so much more applicable, and so much more inclusive to so many more of our students. It's really exciting to give them an opportunity to do the critical work where many of them in the past were breaking off into, I would say, rhetoric and doing approaches in other areas, or deciding they wanted to do org because they wanted to take a critical approach.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting how students now are so well equipped to talk about identity in ways that we haven't in the past, and there's already kind of a critical edge to the conversations they want to have in class. And so I'm really curious to see what happens when this group of students start to have families. And I know they already have families, obviously, but start to do the traditional pairing and creating of family structure. So is that going to be some kind of cultural change? Jordan, you have any thoughts on the critical movement?
I think that what Kathy said is exactly right. I think that there has been like a stream of thought, since the early 90s when Lanneman published one of the first pieces advocating for critical interpersonal, but like a real push to have words to kind of describe this research that we want to do. And I think that like critical interpersonal gives us that vocabulary to talk about it. But I think the thing that I'm most excited about is kind of the proliferation of critical approaches, right? And so it's not just RDT anymore that we can pull from, but there's a lot of different, and that's the thing that I'm hopeful for, and I hope that like we kind of pursue in the future as well, which is just more of these more critical vocabularies, and including a lot of different ones to help us articulate different experiences in different ways.
Yeah, and it's been interesting how people are trying to turn RDT into a critical, like I know there's critical elements of RDT, right? But it's not a critical theory per se.
Well, exactly. And then it's like the critical theory, even though the word critical is never mentioned in the text itself once.
Yeah, I think it has potential. I want to see like a transformation with that.
I think
or classic theories in general.
Yeah.
Like someone said, could you really do that with family communication patterns? Why not? I don't know. Nothing jumps off the top of my head, but why should we hold any theory sacred to one tradition? Is the question I keep asking, and people are so resistant. Jordan, was I cutting you off from something?
Well, no, because I think the other thing that was really interesting when you mentioned family communication patterns is also this move to understand conformity orientation, not necessarily as this bad thing, right? Because of course in an individualistic culture, conformity orientation, be linked to all of these terrible aspects. But I think that like a critical lens and like a different way, a niche way of looking at those things is really kind of like progressing. They wouldn't call it critical, obviously, but kind of, you know what I'm saying? Like a kind of different way of looking at it pushes those forward.
Yeah, I just talked to the student in class yesterday, and she was debating another student because that student was saying, we need to break out of conformity. And she said, no, I come from Latino AX, a Mexican American family, and we kind of need our conformity to kind of protect us and to be resilient against what culture tries to place on our families that is not, necessarily our family values or the family values from where we come from. So I thought that was really interesting. Another way to kind of look at conformity is resilience, as she framed it, even if it doesn't match up with how we always define resilience in the field. Although that's another episode of Family Conversations. All the folks coming at that resilience work from so many different angles and trying to define it in so many different ways. Now, we are working on a project together, the three of us, so in part. So you've seen that they're brilliant, so they have earned their spot on Family Conversations, the prestigious show that it is. But beyond that, I'll be fully transparent in that we're working on a project together and I'll let them two talk about it. And this project deals with metaphors for family communication. So do you want to tell our viewers about that?
Sure. One of the things that I'm really excited about this project is, to really introduce and bring family comm in for our beginning scholars. For me, one of the most transformative assignments in my early academic career was being forced to write my own metaphors piece. And so really having that opportunity to think about how do we approach family, and if we approach family through this lens, what does it mean? So that's what we're doing. Family communication, insert metaphor here. And so it's been, we're in the stage where we're looking through first rounds of essays. I've bawled openly through a couple of them because they've been so just beautiful, and the stories and, the pieces are so impactful, and it really opens up for students in a very accessible way. This is a way that you could engage the field. And this is a way that you could understand your family. And this is a way that you can move your own research forward.
Yeah, definitely. Jordan, you got any thoughts on that?
Oh, he was doing so good.
Jordan is babysitting today, which I think is awesome. Like, what better to add to a family conversation than a baby, right?
Well, actually, his mom is home, so I'm gonna hand him off.
That's back to studying families and objects. Is it? And not call a baby an object.
And I tout that this show is unedited and raw. This is about as raw as you get.
Yeah, like, you can't see the baby throw up this here. I think the one thing that I'm really excited about for our book is that we have authors and researchers included that should definitely be in family comm. Like everything that they're talking about enriches our discipline, but have been not included, pushed out. And so what I'm really excited about is that we have a lot of different authors that are going to expose students or even current researchers to different ways that we can do family comm, and also different ways of representing family, right? So we have some more the more traditional lit reviews, but then we also have beautiful autobiographical essays, beautiful artwork, or art research. And so I'm just really excited for that to be included, and hopefully become more canon, and I think that that's really important as we're moving forward in the family comm discussion.
Yeah, so as Jordan was getting at, we have chapters like family communication is art, family communication is failure, family communication is performance, right? And so just such different ways to think about it. And then we're joining in and we're writing one on family communication as choice. And so lots of different directions to go there. We talked a little bit about, how this is good for students. Do you think that, kind of getting back to Jordan's point, that this is something we should be doing more of in family comm? Like, because we're kind of giving the authors permission, or ourselves permission, to theorize a little bit and not be necessarily so lost in the data or lost in, the 5 big family comm theories.
Right.
Any thoughts on that?
I think it's really important for us to think about the ways that we can do things differently, and especially be a dedicated space for having that. So many of those prestige journal articles that we're looking at are very formulaic, and especially for, some of our scholars who are a little bit more post-positivist, pushing out and is a new challenging way to do things. I know, for me as a student, not comparing our senior scholars who are, heavy post-positivist to myself by any means, but, being socialized in a very post-positivist department, to think in metaphor was a very challenging thing to do. And I just remember in my doc program being exposed to the communication as book, that was, I don't remember when it was published, but, and really getting a chance to get an overview of the field.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I'm probably guilty of it, and many other scholars are as well. I'm not always the best at reading outside my area.
Yeah.
And so this is a very convenient way to do so.
Yeah, I think I'm very thankful. I had a seminar with Joanne Keaton at the University of Kansas, and it was not a family communication seminar. You know, it wasn't a group seminar either, though. It was our comm theory, and she had us do a lot of drawing or thinking or artistic stuff, and I think that opened up a lot of avenues of thinking for me. I wish more people had that in graduate education, because I just assumed everyone got a little bit of that, but maybe that's not the case. All right, so final question. We're running out of time here. I've been asking everyone for the last answer to share something that they think people should read or consume that would help them be better family communication scholars or understand family, or just, you know, something that would be good for family communication. It can be old, it can be brand new, book, article, whatever. What do you want to bring to the table that we should think about as family communication scholars?
So I just finished it, but I'd like people to read Dr. Devika Chawla's Home Uprooted. And particularly when thinking about like family communication, it's an oral history, years and years of oral history. And so I just think that like the more that we can integrate that into family communication, it gives us a way of thinking about what family is, what studying family is, how we study family. When we say the word family, what does that like look like? And it also obviously like involves like objects and things like that, which I'm intensely interested in. But I think it's really helpful. It's beautifully written. And so in terms of a book that you want to like read to become familiar with a field or an approach or a thought, like it's a beautifully written book. And so that would be my go-to.
Awesome. And we'll put that in the links as well as the other things we talked about today. Kathy?
Yeah, this was the hardest question for me to think about, because honestly, can I cheat? I might cheat. So book, Robin Boylorn's Sweetwater, just a beautiful, vivid, evocative autoethnography, interspersed with poetic work, about her family, her mom, her relationship with her sister. It's phenomenal. Theory-wise, you know, looking at a line of theory work, Dr. Sharday Davis's work has just been so phenomenal to see developed. It's been so impactful for my students. Strong Black Women Collective, so many great applications of that as well, and it transfers so interestingly into organization as well. And so like the breadth of the impact there is brilliant.
And students respond to that, especially the theory piece that she did from that so well. And like, I love that people start to think like we try to say family comm needs to expand, or interpersonal, you know, writ large needs to expand. I love that piece serves as that demonstration and shows them there are other ways to think about that are not necessarily white ways or, you know, even classed ways, right? So it'll be fun to kind of see. Fun, it's important.
Yeah, well, fun and important. Yeah.
It is fun because there was so much resistance. I was in an earlier episode, I was talking with Don Braithwaite, and a lot has changed so quickly in terms of interpersonal and family communication being an accepting field, including the fact that family comm is not just interpersonal anymore, right? We have the rhetoric, we have the media studies that are starting to, or, you know, to your choice, Jordan, I remember people saying, well, Devika's not really family comm. I was like, you've not read the book.
Yeah.
You've not read the book if you say that. And what a racist assumption to make. Yeah. Like just that, oh, well, she's not, right? Or my go to the Matt piece is E. Patrick Johnson's piece where he introduces queer theory. And people are like, well, that's not really family. I'm like, the whole damn thing is based on conversations with his grandmother. Like, what is more family communication than talking with grandma?
Right.
Anyway, so I'm optimistic, but cautiously optimistic. So hope other folks are too. All right. Anything else you want to share or say?
No, thank you for your patience. I so appreciate that.
Patience.
Well, with the little
You're doing
guy.
these a favor by being you're doing the discipline a favor by being on this show. Thank you. This was a great conversation, and we are out of time, so I'll wrap it up here. Thank you so much for tuning in to yet another episode of Family Conversations. Be sure to check out the links for some of the resources that we talked about today. Thanks again to my guests, Dr. Kathy Denker and Dr. Jordan Allen, and we'll see you next time on Family Conversations.